I got married when I was like 19. I had to get married really fast, unmarried myself, then I married again. So you're training the brides, but we're not training the grooms. We are only training brides to know how you can sustain a relationship. And they were all uncomfortable with these words. So I ended up calling our genitals flowers.
As part of a biodata check for getting married, they have not checked with each other about physical compatibility. Like, people are pulling out medical records and how everything on paper was correct. And it was an arranged marriage, and this person was financially well to do, and she was doing very well. The families met, and everyone got along very well with each other. She got along really well with her mother in law, everything. But there was zero compatibility physically.
You cannot fake it. A woman can fake it.
And they unfortunately do a lot of times, which is a very bad sign that we are living in today. I don't believe that a marriage can be sustained long term if Aili, there's this saying in Hindi, शादी का लड्डू जो खाए वो पचता है, जो ना खाए वो भी पचता है, which is like a constant conversation for people from the time they're like 22 till like the age of 28. There's this conversation of kab karoge, kab karoge, kab karoge. And for people that have not managed to get married by the time they're 35, then they're like, koi nahi bachega, tumse koi shaadi nahi karega. But it's kind of wild that there is just like this, it's like this one milestone that everyone is expected to hit in the world that we live in today.
Yeah, I got married twice. I also did. I got married when I was like 19. And then because I thought I had to get married really fast, then I unmarried myself, then I married again. So I think it's a pressure that all of us face. Because it's like how it should be, life should be. Like, you should get married. Best. Get married. It will solve all your problems.
That is...
See, all your sex problems will be solved because you'll be having sex all the time. Then you'll solve all your companionship problems, and you're never alone, you're always with someone. Are you against marriage?
I know. I love the fact that you have said exactly all of those things that are myths about getting married. As someone who is married right now.
It's not true.
And as someone who works with so many people that are either in the process of getting married or in the process of leaving their marriages, I can safely say that marriage in itself is a whole other dragon, monster that you need to tame in life. Like, it cannot be an end goal. But it seems to be this end goal that is sort of like it's shoved down your throat through culture, through conditioning, through every possible subliminal messaging, that the eventuality to get settled in life, whether it's for a boy or a woman or a girl, whether it's for absolutely anybody, the idea of settling.
Because then you settle. Before settling, you're wild. Right? So you have to settle. If you don't settle, then you'll be wild when you're not supposed to be wild.
But that is also, again, I think, a cultural thought process of whether you are going, whether you're straying sexually, whether you're, somebody who's promiscuous.
Yeah,
but it's not about that. The settling has to do with tum settle ho jaoge to family बना पाओगे, और तुम settle हो जाओगे तो तुम financially settle हो जाओगे.
Yeah, but it's true. It's true, right? Like, you need someone at home waiting for you to be able and doing stuff for you at home, like organizing your cupboard.
You told me about this one event that you did earlier. The one I think late last year
With brides to be.
Yeah, that one. Tell us more. Tell me something. What happened there? What was interesting?
So brides to be wanting to understand what is it that they have to do once they get married. or like that was the premise. So you're training the brides, but we're not training the grooms. We are only training brides to know how you can sustain a relationship physically and emotionally. That was the premise. And there were like 2 events like this. One had a lot of women in their 20s, some like beginning 30s, mostly from metro cities. Like
Wow, that's very interesting. I would imagine, like, this kind of thing would only be small towns.
no, they were Marwari and
Interesting.
Gujarati.
Interesting.
Because obviously works through references and one person knows another, they're all
Correct.
getting married and
Correct.
and I think like especially in Bombay there are lots of like Gujaratis and Marwaris, although Marwaris are everywhere. I feel. I don't know. Especially in Kolkata, no? Kolkata.
I think it has a lot to do with disposable income. I feel the fact that there must be a lot of people getting married, and there are a lot of people getting married, but there are certain cultures where there is disposable income, so they have the access to do these kinds of workshops, make their sort of going to be bride journey a lot more expansive.
Then you would expect like a Punjabi to do that, no? Because usually Punjabis spend a lot of money in their weddings and all the extra
That's
bits
actually
and stuff.
no. They spend money on. I mean, this is a completely different conversation, but yeah, I don't think it's cultural like that. But I feel like it has a lot to do with the fact that people have more disposable income. The other thing that it has to do with, I feel, is probably that a lot of these girls were in arranged situations.
So it was a mix of arranged marriages as well as, love
Yeah.
marriages or what they call love come
arranged. Yeah, but love come arranged is also arranged.
Yeah, but I
Technically.
think arranged marriages work very well, to be honest. I feel. I wish I had a family who arranged for my marriage. I mean, I had a friend who tried to arrange me, but yeah, her choice was very bad. So
what happens when the family's choice is very bad? That's the fear, na?
Yeah, but she was not my family. I don't think she was in that space. If she had been part of my family, knew me well, because you're not marrying really like an individual. You're marrying like a family, like many people, not just like your close family, but then your extended family as well. So I think family knows best.
So you do believe that people marry the entire family?
Yeah.
Like the other entire.
And that's how it should be.
Why?
Because you cannot survive as a couple on your own without any support. Unless you have like a bunch of 100 friends to function in society, you will need other people. A 2-people unit will not be able to fight the world, although that's what it looks like even in Kayamat se Kaya Tak, they die. They get killed, no?
Yeah.
I'm remembering that. So you need like a society to kind of live well. You need the support of a family.
So do you think some of these people were sent to this workshop? Some of these brides were sent to these workshops or were given references by family members to come to any of these workshops?
No, I think they were concerned themselves. I mean, the biggest fear or the what they were worried about is that, can I sustain this marriage? Like, will my partner cheat on me? I think that was like biggest sort of worry everyone had. Will I be able to satisfy my partner? Or was something else that they were talking about or were concerned about? Like, will I be able, what do I need to do to satisfy my partner?
So these were like, these questions were coming up for you.
Yeah.
Were any of these people that had had some form of physical interaction with their to-be husbands before?
So that was something that nobody was willing to speak about in public.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the cutest thing was the fact that I had this one exercise where I was asking them to do a breathing exercise, and during the breathing exercise, you talk about genitals, or you say, yeah, like breathe into your vulva or breathe into. So I wanted to assess what kind of words they were comfortable with. And then there was an exercise that I would throw words like, I'm not going to say them here, but all the words that refer to genitals. And they were all uncomfortable with these words. So I ended up calling our genitals flowers.
Wow.
Because there was a lot of like, no, I don't want to hear the word, pussy. I don't want to hear the word vulva. I don't want to hear the word vagina. I don't want to hear the word nothing. That could give a sense of the actual like organ. So flower was it. And then we had a lot of exercises where people spoke about what intimacy is. And for most people, intimacy meant emotional intimacy. So the physical aspect was not touched upon at all.
What do you think these...
What do you think that means?
What?
The fact that people cannot say the word.
I think it's extremely problematic, if you're asking me. I think if a person has grown up in so much shame that they're not able to even name an organ that is a part of their body, how are they ever supposed to explore how to make the most of that organ? How are they ever supposed to explore pleasure? How are they ever supposed to have any conversation with their partner about what their needs or their desires or their pleasure is?
But the thing is like, there was only one woman who was slightly older who spoke about sex. And eventually she broke down and she's like, I was so scared when I first had sex with my partner because I'm already 30 or I was already 30 and everybody had told me that it's very painful and it was so painful. But then you get used to it. She said that.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, okay, actually... And then obviously other girls were like, oh, really? So then after the pain goes after some time or like,
yeah.
And she was like, yeah. After some time, the pain goes, but it's normal to have pain when you're having sex. And obviously that was information given by her to a bunch of like 40, 50, girls that now have a real life experience and think that, yes, this is how it's going to be because it's a real life experience and is being normalized not just by one person speaking, but also by a bunch of other maybe relatives or friends who have experienced
that it's painful.
Yeah.
Yeah. When we were growing up, they used to, they means what? Everyone around us, whether all the adults in the room would, like if you were naked, then they would say nangu pangu, or they would use words like if a cousin was, for whatever reason, like, toddler cousin is a little bit naked, probably they're changing clothes in front of a slightly older cousin, we end up saying things like shame. And I feel like all of these messages that you get when you're growing up end up sort of shaping your idea around what is comfortable and what is not comfortable to talk about, firstly, because if you're not even allowed to address it, if you're not allowed to explore it, if you're not allowed to see it, if there's no vocabulary for it, then of course, then your genitals become that one part of your body that you have not explored, and you find it not just to be private, but also there's so much shame attached to it. Like, off the bat, if I can think of when I think of a lot of my clients, a lot of them have no idea, firstly, what they want from their partner. So if you talk about how would you like to be pleasured, they have no idea because they've not explored their own bodies. And I feel like they've not explored their own bodies probably because there is so much shame around even giving your body parts a certain name. Have you heard of this song that a lot of people have been teaching their children as part of sex ed, which is, these are my private parts, private parts, private parts. Oh my God. And then it says, these are my private parts and no one should touch them and no one should see them.
Fun.
And
that's how everybody turns into an exhibitionist.
on one end,
Or the opposite.
or the complete opposite, where they're not even able to experience sexual pleasure with the light on. The
I can't.
number of people...
I can't do it with a light on.
You can't?
No.
So is it because of something to do with your body? Some form of shame attached to...
Yeah, but it's not even...
Talk to that a little bit.
But it's not even genitals, like, because I was born in Finland. So in Finland, you go for sauna. So you're naked all the time. Like in front of at least like same, mother, aunts, cousins. So you go inside and you're fully naked. And then you see also like men relatives or family members who go like, so there is a vision of, genitals. Also swimming pool, you see genitals. All the kids are in the same thing. So you see each other's genitals. So genitals is not so much of a problem, but because then I moved and that's what shame can also pick up along the way. So
Correct.
You don't have to be born in that situation and be ashamed. You could have like a partner who's shaming some body part of yours, like, like, or you're too fat, or you're too thin, or your boobs are
Your
too small.
Your armpits are too black. I've heard that very recently.
Yeah.
So a friend of mine told me that she's very conscious of her armpits being black because her first boyfriend told her once that why are your armpits so black?
But then it doesn't need to be the first boyfriend. It can be even the last one.
Yeah.
So the moment you start like shaming any body part, even once, with all the messages around, then that's how like you start not wanting to see yourself, which is what I don't want to see. I don't want anyone to see me.
Yeah.
From going to like being a naked child in a sauna, now I've become someone who will switch off the light, put a blindfold on to the other person just to make sure that they don't see me at all.
But do you think, would you suggest for someone before they get married to have at least explored their own pleasure?
Yeah. I mean, that should be like mandatory. I think exploring one, like your own pleasure should be mandatory, that they should be taught in schools.
Yeah, you think that self-love, exploring your own body should be taught in school?
Especially with women clients, what happens is that, of course, like women clients have it more than male clients. So men are, it's okay for men to masturbate or explore self-pleasure. They tell each other like, yeah, it's fine. And they discover porn much earlier in life. But women expect that their pleasure is a man's job.
Correct.
So even I'm waiting to get married because I'm waiting for someone to give me pleasure. It's not in my hands. So even when you ask them, is he touching you right? Are you having an orgasm? Are you experiencing any form of pleasure? They are not sure. And then you ask them, have you told your partner where it feels good? It's like, yeah, but I've never done it to myself. So
I don't know if it feels good.
I don't know, because it's a man's job.
But it's not. It's your job. Your pleasure is your own responsibility.
They will not be able to know how it works, like where it's supposed to work, because first of all, each one is different. Our bodies are so different, right, from a man's body. And it's not like for everyone, of course. There are men who struggle with the same stuff, but we are so different. So if you don't know yourself, your partner, it's more than like trying to read somebody's mind. It's like trying to read a body, and without giving any feedback, it's impossible for a man to give you pleasure.
I have to tell you about this one client that I was talking to a little while ago. And I mean, we were discussing something completely different, but she told me about an experience of hers. We were discussing her second marriage, and she told me about her first marriage, and how everything on paper was correct. And it was an arranged marriage, and this person was financially well-to-do, and she was doing very well in school and college, and the families met, and everyone got along very well with each other, and she got along really well with her mother-in-law, everything, okay? But there was zero compatibility physically.
Do you struggle saying the word compatibility?
Compatibility.
I struggle.
Yeah? Say it with me. Compatibility. Great. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. So she would just keep saying कि boss sink ही नहीं है in bed. And of course she was talking about how it took her a long time, and it was her first marriage was the experiment to figure out what she likes in the bedroom or outside the bedroom. And
in other rooms.
In any room. Yeah. What she likes and what she dislikes. And also whether or not she is able to create pleasure for her partner and for what they liked and what they don't like. Right? So I want to understand this, because in arranged marriage systems, there is so much scrutiny done on a human being before they are introduced.
Money is scrutinized.
Background checks are done. People's pura zindagi ka digital history is taken out. Big files are created of ye kahan gaya tha, ye kahan raha tha, ya ye kahan rahi thi, ya kya hua tha. And kitna padhai kiya hai aur kya mark sheet aayi thi. And I know of people that have pulled out people's class 10th ki mark sheet as part of a biodata check, background check for getting married. They have not checked with each other about physical compatibility. People are pulling out medical records.
Yeah.
You're getting your partners, that has actually now become the norm, I feel, at least getting your partners tested for thalassemia, for other genetic disorders. Thalassemia to now, because obviously parents have become...
but not STIs.
Not STIs.
No STI testing.
Not STIs. They will check for thalassemia कि तुम बच्चा कर सकते हो कि नहीं कर सकते. Healthy बच्चा कर सकते हो कि नहीं कर सकते. But STIs check नहीं करेंगे. It's bizarre to me कि
because you're not supposed to.
हाँ, but जैसे ही शादी कर लो, the first thing that everyone says is, okay, खुशखबरी कब दे रहे हो? Every ritual around marriage is at the brink of getting married or after getting marriage is a conversation about creating pleasure, making the suhagrat amazing, so that within the next 1 year the entire family has been awarded this gift of a new child. Boss, बच्चे कहाँ से आते हैं? Sex से आते हैं ना?
Yeah, but you don't need to experience pleasure to have sex, na?
But for people that are not compatible to have sex with each other will not keep having sex with each other, na, if the pleasure is not coming.
Then the child is out.
But that is also assuming that within the first time that you have sex, you will end up having a child. Somebody has to repeatedly keep having sex, na? There are so many people that will have unprotected sex for years on end in order to have children, but they don't. So what are we making going to be? It's going to be what, one thing that you check off? A to-do list, a chore like laundry. आज करने हैं, कपड़े सारे गंदे हो गए, अच्छा ओके. थोड़ी देर बाद जाके सेक्स करना है क्योंकि बच्चा पैदा करना है.
But that's how people do it actually. I mean, at least my clients do it like that.
Okay.
Let's put it on the calendar. I'm ovulating now. Let's do it.
I think scheduling sex is great, but if both people are enjoying it, I don't think scheduling sex is a bad thing.
But then have you ever asked your client does your partner enjoy?
Haan, but
what do they say?
Most often they say the other one enjoys.
And then what do you ask after that?
I mean, it's like, how do you know?
Yeah. And then what do they say?
They say so. What else are you supposed to
No, but then do they actually say so? Or are you assuming? what makes you believe
This
that
is-
someone is experiencing pleasure? What makes you believe that? Because they're making sound, because they are wet,
Performating.
because they're wet
Performative.
and they're making sound. This is like, okay, but
that is for women usually, huh? But in case of men, you feel like that because they came, that they enjoyed.
Yeah, they came,
Right?
but that coming could happen within like few seconds also. Like,
It could take a very long time also if you're not enjoying yourself. The point is that, okay, this is a full, very important conversation to be had with people, that there is something called arousal non-concordance, which is that अगर आपका ये वाला एरिया टच किया जाएगा, आपको अराउजल महसूस हो सकता है, इवन इफ आपको मजा नहीं आ रहा, इवन इफ आपका मूड नहीं हो रहा कुछ करने का. But at the same time, neither is climaxing nor is preparation for intercourse, and is something that you can assume is making the other person feel good about it. Right?
so then, like, how do you know if somebody is feeling
I think
good?
people should communicate, nahi?
Communication.
I think सब कुछ boils down to communication.
Communication.
But मुझे ये बताओ, अगर आप communicate नहीं, आप क्यों communicate नहीं कर पाते? Compatibility ही है ना? एक तरीके का तो compatibility communication
Because I
भी तो-
don't even know what I like. How am I supposed to communicate?
Correct.
What do I communicate? I think
That I
you
didn't
know,
enjoy this. So you use process of elimination, na?
but
If you don't understand yet, or have not had the chance to explore your body yet, and you're already in a marriage, and you have found yourself in a marriage or whatever, and you found yourself in a situation where you have now chosen to be with this one partner, and you have to figure it out with them only, then use process of elimination. Try 4 things, see what's working, see what's not working. Take a tutorial together.
But what if nothing is working?
That is a very interesting point. So now if somebody is not sexually compatible, can a marriage still exist? Tell me.
I think it can. I mean, that's the work that happens with couples, right? So you are not compatible. Like, most people who come to us are probably not compatible sexually. I mean, at least the ones that come to me.
Yeah, I have
Like-
to agree.
Like, they're not compatible. One person wants one thing. The other person, like, one wants passionate sex on the sofa, on the floor, on the kitchen table, mostly penetrative. And the other person wants romance, wants it like really slow. They want to cuddle. They want to go on a date first, dance, give him flowers, etc.
Yeah.
And this person is not willing to understand that giving flowers and, you know, dancing and dating and romancing is part of sex, because they think that only penetrative sex, or like throwing someone against the wall in the bathroom, is exciting or is sex. So I think but can it work? Like, I can give a solution. Like, when we talk about sexual experiences, it's a bit of a give and take, especially if you are compatible in other fields, like emotional, financial, children, whatever, families, etc. In terms of values, you are compatible. Then understand it as a giving and receiving. Like, I can do one throwing myself against the wall once, and then you can do a bit of romancing. But I should be able to tell you that for me, sex will start with some flirting, or sex will start with some chatting, or you telling me that I'm beautiful, or like that you want me. So I think that verbal kind of communication is important for some people, while for others it's more important to just get into action. And it is often gendered, but not always, because I've heard women also like, okay, well, I think the best way to come back together when we are fighting, the best way is to have sex. And the husband has been like, but I need emotional connection, and I need to have a conversation and not fight with you to be able to have sex. So it's kind of, it can flip a role. So it happens. It's just that for men, like, you would not have an erection. So for you, it's actually, you cannot fake it. A woman can fake it.
Yeah.
And
they unfortunately do a lot of times, which is a very bad sign. Because if you are faking it constantly, what you're telling your partner is that you're enjoying it. And then you're confusing them by why you don't want it more. Right?
Yeah.
So that's actually like a huge pointer for bad communication when there is a lack of compatibility in the way that you are exploring your sexual lives together. Okay, tell me a little bit more about if sex is not on the table in a marriage between these two people, they've figured it out, they've gone through their whole thing. I don't know if I believe that a marriage can exist today in the world that we are living in today. I don't believe that a marriage can be sustained long term if sex is not compatible.
Have you seen data? Everybody's in a sexless marriage.
And I feel that really bad for them. I don't know what else to say.
People are in a sexless marriage. Most people.
What is then keeping them together? What are they compatible? What are the different forms?
There's so much more to a relationship than sex.
Okay.
Right?
Talk to me a little bit about
what is so much more, like companionship, right? Emotional connection, building a family, having kids, just building a life together. People build their businesses together. Like
a partnership.
It's a partnership. And families. Okay. So there are all these other elements that are part of a person's life. And they are, as for some people, they are much more important than sexual activity. Also because most people have bad sex. Right? Most people are having a sex that they don't want to have. They're just doing it because it becomes a need. When they feel horny, they do it. They don't see it as physical intimacy or something that they can do to actually build the overall relationship.
Okay, but can it then be a happy marriage?
I think it can be. It can be a happy marriage. What needs to be probably worked on is physical intimacy that is not sexual. Because you can live your entire life without having sex, but you will actually get sick if you don't have physical touch and intimacy. That doesn't need to be sexual. You can be happy unless...
That doesn't need to be intercourse. But no, it does not need to be sexual?
No, it doesn't need to be. You don't need to engage your genitals if you don't want to. Like, ultimately, what is sex? Like, some engagement of genitals?
Yeah.
You would understand that. Yeah. Like, if the genitals are not, then it becomes erotic. Like, it can be erotic but not sexual.
But then wouldn't you be somebody who's on the A spectrum and therefore it's something that you don't wish to do?
Who isn't on the A spectrum? Who isn't on the asexual spectrum? If you are a demisexual and you need emotional connection to have sex, then you are on the spectrum also.
True. But you still need the emotional connection and you still want the sex.
Right. But you can also be someone who's on the spectrum who doesn't need to engage with genitals.
At all. And that's completely fine.
Yeah.
But how does marriage work for someone like that?
So if both people are like that, it's perfect.
And what if they're not?
If they're not, the other person needs to establish what is it that they are okay with. Like, it could be masturbation, right? Partnered or on their own. Or they can also open up the relationship.
Yeah.
Right? So point is that it depends on how important is a genital to you. Or like expressing yourself with genitals to you, how important is it? Like because a lot of people, it's like, it feels like they need to come. And that coming is the only thing that they need.
No, I don't think when I'm saying what I'm saying, at least my perspective is a little bit different in the fact that I don't think that sexual intercourse has to, or any form of engagement of genitals has to result in orgasm for it to be fun. Firstly, I think it can be fun and you can enjoy yourself, and it's not necessary because that pressure of orgasming or that pressure of I'm going to borrow this word pinnacle from Bridgerton, the pressure of the pinnacle is not a fair pressure, because I think you enjoy the process a lot more when you don't have that pressure on you to provide the climax or to receive the climax. Sometimes when you're really trying very hard to climax yourself also, you completely disconnect with the entire experience. So, I mean, of course, the thing is that orgasm, sexual relationships, lack thereof orgasm, wanting to use genitalia or not use genitalia in sexual compatibility conversation is obviously not one size fits all.
Yeah.
But, and this is a hot take, but my belief system is that if you are not sexually compatible with your partner and you are still in a monogamous relationship, which is the sort of idea of a happy marriage, it's very difficult for the happy part to exist if you are not going to be sexually satisfied, because I think it builds so much resentment that it spills over all of the other aspects, the partnership aspect, the companionship aspect, the family aspect, the financial aspect, the holidaying aspect, everything.
Yeah, but it depends on how important sex is to you. Like, you could be wanting to be sexual, but most people, what happens is, like, because the partner doesn't want to have sex, then their desire also starts weaning off, and then they're like, it's okay, then we have it like once in 6 months and it's okay, I can live with that, or once a year, I can live with that. It's a decision they make, because for them it wasn't probably something that was so important that they had to do it every day. But there are some people who simply cannot, they can't. So it's also like you establishing how important that activity is to you, because if it's not so important and then you end up doing it once a year, but everything else is like good, then it's fine. It's also fine.
No, of course.
It's not that you have to, because definitely like one partner needs to decide how important it is.
So then it's an adjustment, right?
I don't know if you call it adjustment. Is just,
I mean, पूरी दुनिया बोलती है marriage is an adjustment. ठीक है? Happy marriage is an adjustment. It's about understanding. ऐसे सब words use करते हैं for marriage, right?
I like using transaction. Like
transaction.
So if I am getting this from you, or I'm not getting this from you, I'll get something else though. So if I'm getting that something else, I will just be okay with it, because some level of satisfaction is coming to me from somewhere.
So then what are the different things that you say? Okay, so if sex is not important to you as a person, or it is not of paramount importance to you as something that you want to find a compatible partner for, then for what are the other reasons that you would like to find another partner? And what does compatibility in all of those different categories look like then?
What are the categories?
Like, okay, I feel like when we think of compatibility in the arranged marriage setup, like how are parents looking at it? Let's go back to the roots, right?
Yeah.
When parents are looking at it, they look at family background, they look at culture, they look at religion. They used to look at caste at one point of time. They look at financial background. They look at financial setup, which is background is माँ बाप के पास कितना पैसा है या family के पास कितना पैसा है. How are you doing? तो आज आपका career कैसा है? So like, how are you someone who's ambitious? Are you somebody who can provide for the other person if that is so? Or are you somebody who is all consumed by your career, so there is only so much you will bring to the relationship and the family? Depends, like gender roles, right? But these are sort of like the kind of tick boxes.
Yeah, but I think what has happened is that we are transitioning as a society, and those were elements to your identity. So you were not, if you were born in a family or in a caste or whatever, you were probably all looking a little bit like the same. But right now, everybody is trying to create their own identity based on what is it that they want to achieve in life, what is it that they need in general, right? So it's not enough to have family values or cultural values. It's like, especially in India, it's about your independent, like your individual needs and wants. So like the identity has become more complex. Earlier it was based on what was given to you by family, but now, because obviously access to information and globalization, whatever you want to, digitization and all these movements, then you have access to many more identities that you want to embrace, because you are on this Maslow top hierarchy of self realization. So self realization.
Maslow भैया बहुत smart थे, by the way, at least in my opinion.
But yeah, so then now you have that aspect, that how am I compatible? Are my needs or what I want, like my hobbies, what I want to do with my free time? It's become more complex. What are my personal values versus what are my family values? And that's why it's so complicated to actually find what we feel it's a good match, because a lot of times something or the other goes off. Like earlier we had a list of 5 things, now we have a list of 20 things of what needs to match.
And then there are and that is exactly why there are certain marriage brokers, I like to call them, like the people that set up arranged marriages for people, Seema auntie type people.
They do personality tests.
Who do personality tests, but I also that is why you hear them constantly saying, but सब चीजें नहीं मिलेंगी, कहीं तो adjust करना पड़ेगा. Right? I feel उसमें भी थोड़ा logic है, and not इतना logic कि भाई अपने core needs को आप भूल जाओ, but at the same time there is some logic to
how much you can have.
To how much you can have and how much burden you put on one human being to be all of those things, only then they are right for you. And a lot of times people completely forget and are so delusional about what they are willing to bring to the relationship also. Like, what am I bringing to this relationship, and therefore what am I getting in return, I think is a huge conversation that a lot of people avoid. But speaking of avoiding conversations, do you have any couples that come to you before they get married? Or like before they're getting married?
So, yeah, very few.
And what do you tell them are the things that they should consider having a conversation about before they get married?
So one is definitely values. If your value systems don't match, then it doesn't work. Like if one person, for example, values honesty and the other one values success, those are kind of values that don't really align or can create like conflict. Okay. Then, but usually what we go through a process where we look at what kind of conflict can those clashing values create, and then we look at solutions, right? So because then it is also, these are couples who are willing to learn the new skills, new relationship skills. So then they learn skills on how to address those conflicts. You look at values, you look at your goals, what is it that you want to achieve in life? Yeah. So if I want to move abroad, then, and the other person wants to live in India with the family, then it doesn't really work, right? Because you need to have some kind of projection in the future. Then needs, what are your personal needs? Like affectionate, physical. And that's when you talk about how much sex, how much physical, what kind of physical intimacy do you want and do you need? Do you even know? If you don't know, then let's look at that. Yeah. And that's it's one of the toughest conversations, especially in an arranged marriage setting when you're preparing for arranged marriage. Because if someone says something that might but the other person finds yucky, like example, like classic food fetishes. Like if one partner tells the other one, like, I'm into food fetishes, and this person rejects them, then that person is going to tell the entire family that this is the reason. And that additional shame will go and then shut the person off from anything. But that's why most of conversations need to have a pre-combo that these are the rules of the conversation. No yucking, no shaming, blah, blah. But what is the guarantee?
Yeah, but
You
what
know
is
how
the
it is.
guarantee?
Like
Exactly.
if I find something completely off, like going down, like it's difficult to talk about these things before you're actually like locked into a wedding.
I also think a lot of people when they are getting married are bringing their best self to every conversation. So they choose what they want to discuss in advance and choose what they don't, which is actually also a really bad sign, in my opinion, for a sustainable marriage. If you're not able to um, communicate with each other honestly about the things that are a part of your life or a part of your history that are going to be pertinent to their life. Boss, if there's something that happened in your history that has no relevance to your life today, there's no reason to discuss it. But if there is going to be something that is a part of your life or a part of your needs or something that you desire or something that you are a sort of an idea of a picture that you have in your mind for what your life is supposed to look like. I think it's extremely important to let the other person know that this is an expectation setting, right? Like you're setting this expectation for this human being.
Yeah.
I think I want to add to this, which I think are very important conversations also, which we don't really have a lot of. One is finances.
Yeah.
I think it's so important for people to talk about their finances and talk about it openly. Ki boss, this is the amount I earn. This is the amount I've saved. This is my family's sort of net
And this
worth
is how much I spend and
value.
how often.
And this is how much I spend and how often. Exactly. How much can I save from what I earn? What is the, am I in debt?
But that's it. The money and sex never gets spoken about
Right?
properly. Yeah.
Yeah. And also the other thing is like, okay, I want to marry you because you have money, but I'm going to use your money to spend on certain things for me. Should also be a conversation in advance. So you're setting that expectation that this other person is supposed to provide for you in a certain provide for you financially in a certain way.
It's become like it is too shameful, and then it doesn't get addressed at the beginning, and it becomes the reason for divorce.
Yeah.
Where then like all the money is gone.
Yeah.
Because
or like, or you walked into a relationship thinking that you were two partners, that you were like dinks, like double income, no kids, like walking into that sort of new idea of relationship. And then you realize all of a sudden that this human being doesn't save a penny of what they earn. Or you realize that they always overshoot their expenses by how much they are earning. So they're always in a deficit cycle of some kind. Or you realize that they earn a lot of money, they save a lot of money, but a very large part of their disposable income goes to their expenditure on their families and the people that are dependent on them. And this is something you were never aware of beforehand.
Yeah.
That, they are providing for someone else also, which is completely fine if that is the case when you're walking. Like, I definitely believe that for people that give money back home, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it.
But at least inform the person that you are supposed
But you
to
should
share
let
a back
your partner
out.
know what your finances look like. And this is such a shameful conversation for so many people that I know of so many people who choose to, even despite being very well educated, being very compatible in all other forms, choose to keep their finances completely separate of each other in marriages because they either they don't trust their partner with finances or they don't want to divulge their financial status, whatever it is. I don't want to tell you where my money is going. So, of course, financial privacy again is a choice. But even if it is going to be the case, I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. I like my finances to be my own. You do you, I do me. And we make this one common sort of pool where we do common expenses together.
Yeah, it's like
And that's fine.
Money
That-
and sex. Money and sex are the two things that
Yeah.
are sort of not discussed and should be discussed at
I think
first.
another one that should be discussed is what expectations is the family going to have of you. I think that is another one that really usually is a very sticky spot.
Or maybe you can just tell up front, instead of them having expectation, you just say like, this is how much I am going to be engaged with you. So
I
you
want
go
to
there.
ask you this actually. Do you know the data around why people in India are getting divorced? Can you tell me the top 3 reasons why, according to people in India, are getting divorced?
Must be mother-in-law, no?
You'd be surprised. It is actually number 2.
Yeah. It's
Mother-in-law.
like mother-in-law.
Or
money-
father-in-law. Basically
money
the
and-
in-law.
Money and sex.
Money, infidelity,
Yeah,
and mother-in-law.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are the 3 top reasons why marriages in India are not working for whatever reason.
But then infidelity is not really, it's not always sex related. It's also emotional.
Emotional infidelity, of course. But it's so surprising to me that people don't want to discuss family compatibility. Because they just expect that if you have gotten if these पहले क्या होता था पहले they used to do that kind of vetting कि boss, will this person fit into our family or will our child fit into their family because of patriarchy, but there was still that sort of filtering. अब they're like अगर बच्चे खुश हैं तो हम खुश हैं.
But that's
a
never
lie.
true. It's a lie.
It's not true. बच्चे खुश हैं तो आप खुश नहीं हो. बच्चे खुश होते हैं कभी कभी बिना शादी करके, but आप खुश नहीं थे ना.
But have you ever like met someone who gets along more with the in-law than their partner?
Yeah, I get along more with my mother-in-law than I do with my partner. I think I share a lot more and she shares a lot more with me than maybe I get along very well with my partner, but I also get along very very well with my mother-in-law.
I get much better, like I'm much better with my in-law
Than your partner.
Asma, yeah.
Yeah.
Much better.
Yeah, it's like,
No comparison.
huh?
No, like
There's no comparison.
You wonder like how is this person giving birth to this person? Like it just doesn't.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, totally.
No, I can definitely tell.
I don't know. Maybe it's a child of another mother.
Wow. But no, so I definitely feel and you know, when every time I hear this conversation, a lot of girls my age who've gotten married, friends from school, wherever, they all have something to say about their mother-in-law or their father-in-law or their, like somebody in their in-laws.
Because they're part of their lives. Like it's a big part of
Yeah.
a married person's life.
I just find it bizarre that these are people I've been married. I've dated this person for 12 years. But now I got married to the same person who I dated for 12 years, known their family forever. But now that I've got married to them, my mother-in-law is not nice, or my father-in-law is very staunch and orthodox, or my, whatever.
But do you feel that once we cross this stage where women like are averse to each other, like once we throw these like remnants of patriarchy and we are like
Correct.
actually like we manage to be friends as women, do you think that will end that rivalry with the mother-in-law?
I think part of it is the perpetuation of patriarchy, definitely. And that's conditioning. Like people are not really thinking about it patriarchy wise. When they're actually in it and doing it or whatever, they're thinking logically according to them. But I think a large part of it is also that your value systems can be extremely different because most people are leaving their homes before they're getting married and building their own life and their own value systems. And then when they're getting married and living separate. Like I'll give you...
Everyone though.
I'm saying a lot of people. There are a lot of people that have left their hometowns and gone to different cities to work. They've gone to, or they leave, even within their own hometowns, don't live with their parents anymore.
No, that never happens. Come on. Who can afford rent?
You're only thinking of Bombay. People can afford rent in Delhi. They can afford rent in Kanpur. They can very much
So
afford.
of course they live with the family. People don't live with their families.
Sid,
That's a new information.
But there is actually there is data around the fact that there are a very large number of people that are choosing to not live with their families, which I find very interesting also, because I feel like,
But they live in the same building.
yeah, whatever, but they're not living in the same household. And I find that interesting because I feel like family units are supposed to be your support system. But when you bring a partner into the mix, they're the biggest kalesh to deal with. They are not understanding, they're not adjusting. They are expecting another person to adjust. Now that person is not understanding, not adjusting. You're stuck in the middle. You're really bad at communicating what your parents' needs and requirements are out of your partner. You're really bad at communicating what your partner's
So
needs
what is the
are.
solution?
Like, honestly, my solution is don't live together.
How are you cracked it?
Not living together. I live in a completely different city. My parents don't live in the same city. My in-laws don't live in the same city. Every time I go to meet them, it is with intention.
But what if your in-laws get sick?
Then they'll come and stay with us. And I'm okay with that, because now I've built that relationship with them where I'm comfortable with their presence in my home and they're comfortable with my presence in theirs.
But you're not going there.
No.
They'll have to come here.
Yeah, because I mean, there is nothing to be said about the fact that they're retired and I am a working person. So if somebody needs to sustain the family,
So they need to
so they have to adjust. It would make sense. Otherwise, there would be one person with less income in the household. But if you want to be taken care of, that's how you have to live. Yeah. I mean, I think that logic flies home with at least my in-laws very clearly. I feel like one thing that a lot of people don't get right, again, this was actually one of my closest friends has had this issue. She got married, she lives in England. She started living in, like from the very beginning of her marriage, was living in her in-laws' home. 10 years into that marriage now, she has issues of compatibility with her in-laws. She has issues, therefore, the residue of that spills into her marriage. Her issues, any small issue that is happening in her marriage spills into her issues with her in-laws. And the first thing that she always turns around and says, but this is my house too. And I had to have this conversation with her at some point, and I had to tell her that the way I perceive home, a physical home, that this is my home, is if I can break a wall in the house and I don't have to ask for anyone's permission to do it.
Are you breaking wall?
If I want to break this wall and I want to go into the other room and make it two rooms equal to one room, the only way that I know that this house is mine is if I can do that without having to check with other people.
Wow,
and having to ask for, obviously you'll ask for other people's comfort.
I would ask my flatmate also if I can break a wall.
Yeah, sure. Because you'd say, I would like to break this wall. Are you comfortable with that idea?
Yeah.
But you would not be like, Mummy ji, kya
It's the same thing. It's a matter of respect. I mean, you're respecting the people who live with you, right? So it's a common decision. It's not that
But
you just
not
want to break the wall and you break it.
No, I mean, obviously I will not take a hammer and start breaking the wall.
I understand that.
But
or maybe that would help with the angst.
Maybe. The reason I say this is because a lot of people, as much as a place is made to feel like it is your home, there are certain rules that a certain house lives by. And the people that make those rules are the people that are actually the homeowners of that particular household.
No, not in my case.
But you are still taking rent now from your roommate.
Yes.
हाँ, so there is a financial transaction ना. ऐसे तुमने धर्मशाला खोल के रखी है.
You have to pay for your rights.
Okay. Or you pay for your rights in a house. Yeah. Either you contributing financially to a particular space and therefore you have created that space for yourself.
So, but what if you're not contributing financially but you're just doing a housework? Do you have the same rights only? Is that the count?
By law, you do. But by law, if you are somebody that has done housework and your husband is the person who is the owner of that house, and if you, and I'm assuming that when you say housework, you mean a housewife
Cleaning,
or
yeah,
whatever.
whatever.
A housewife would do it,
Yeah.
or whatever. Your partner is the financial
And you're a
support,
homemaker.
and you are a homemaker, whichever gender. Even then, it is a choice between the partnership and not an extended family decision. That's what I think makes for that family unit or that partnership to have their own home, their own space. I'll explain why I'm saying it. I truly believe that when you go and start living with your in-laws, when you get married, you have to go and adjust into their living system and their ways of living.
Yeah, because
And
it's a
when-
majority.
And while you were living in your own household, you were adjusting to the rules and the regulations and the way that your mother was living, was treating the household.
Yeah.
Your mother or your father, whoever's rules flew in the house. Or your dadi or whoever, depends, right? Whoever the karta, so-called, of the house is, and adjacent rule maker of the house are the people who create that system. That's how society has worked. Now, if you are somebody that says, I want my own life to run exactly the way I want it to run, give no hoots or respect to the rules and regulations forget rules and regulations, but also just considerations towards the people that actually run that household and that actually are the owners of that household, whose household you have gone into.
Okay.
It's extremely important to know the responsibility of that also. And if that is a choice that you are not capable of making, then that is also something you should communicate to your partner, because then you are putting the expectation on your partner
But this is
to
before-
find you a space which is entirely your own.
But then usually when you go into that conversation about the family and you say like, oh, I don't want to live with in-laws, or I don't want to do certain things in the house.
हाँ, तो वो इसीलिए कहती है ना.
But then what is the reaction? Like, rishta cancel.
हाँ, तो कैंसिल इसीलिए ना क्योंकि रिश्ता इज नॉट द बी
But
ऑल
what if
एंड
the rishta was so good and this is the only small thing that was not?
great pointer, but my point is सब लोगों को ये समझना जरूरी है कि बहन, शादी करना गोल नहीं है. शादी को सस्टेन कैसे करोगे? शादी तो कर ली, फिर उसके बाद में तो भी जीना है ना लाइफ में. व्हाट अबाउट शादी हो गई? अ लॉट ऑफ पीपल थिंक दैट द एंड गोल इज शादी कर लो. So the process is like okay, and the achievement or reward is shadi. The reward is not shadi. It's a whole new process.
The goal is not to get divorced.
Then the goal is not to get divorced. पहले तो सस्टेन करोगे
No.
शादी को, फिर आप देखोगे कि आप सस्टेन कर सकते हो, तो फिर आप शादी. Then the goal is, does this marriage thrive? And can a relationship or a happy marriage exist and thrive
Do you have
in a
to be
world
happy?
where I think that is usually
How many people
the
are happy in that marriage? Like when you look around and you walk down the street, and obviously like most people are married, how many faces do you see happiness?
a lot of them.
Really?
Yeah.
Introduce me.
I will. I
Why
truly
there are so
believe
many jokes around the fact that like once you get married is over, and people still do it.
That's what I'm saying ना. I think that is why I said कि शादी का लड्डू है, जो खाए नहीं वो पचता है, जो नहीं खाए वो भी पचता है. I think that is the point. I think a lot of people expect a lot out of a marriage, and the thing is that the setting of expectations of what this is supposed to do for your life is very different to the reality of how to work towards it. I mean, it goes back to obviously effort and all of that. It also goes back to messaging around what this is supposed to be. But for a lot of people, marriage is their ticket to freedom.
But then it's not.
But it's not, right?
They think it is.
तो
All
क्या
young people,
expectation
yeah.
है out of your marriage? What is your expectation from this
But
partnership?
that's the thing, the freedom, like, but because maybe your family has been like so restrictive, so you think that moving out of your family is gonna be freedom.
Correct.
But it's not.
Case in point.
I don't know.
Was that why you got married at 19?
No.
To get out
I'm
of-
not even going why I got married at 19 because that's like another.
But I know of people that did that. They wanted to
it's
get
classic.
out
Yeah.
of their homes, and so they got married. Thinking
Or
कि
maybe
बस
they
ये
fell in love.
at that time they
thought
the
they were
best
in
is
love.
the best is in retrospect they turn around and say मेरे को प्यार व्यार कुछ नहीं था. मेरे को बस यहाँ से निकलना था. I just want to get out.
No, but some people fall in love, especially a lot of people fall in love when they're in their teens, right?
Yeah.
You can fall in love. You
Yeah,
think
of
that you are
course.
attracted to someone and you are all
Of course.
wild and you just think about that person and then you just think like this is the love of my life. And it happens a lot when
But
you're
is there a
teenager.
love of your life, Aili? I want to ask you this question. Is there one person who is the love of your life? Do you believe it? Why wrong question? Tell na.
No.
Do you believe that there is one person who is the love of your life? Do you have a soulmate?
I am
believe in
refusing
soulmates?
answering this question.
You don't
right
believe in
now.
soulmates?
Right now, I don't believe in anything. Right now, I'm just disinterested in romantic relationships for other
For
reasons.
2026.
So,
Okay.
some people, it's different for everyone. It's like sex, right? It's like orgasm. It's like genital, non-genital, penetrative, non-penetrative. It's the same thing, right? For some people, there is a soulmate. For some people, there isn't. For some people, there are like multiple loves, and love is something that you just experience once. It's temporary, and then you move on. So.
Very interesting that I'm having this thought about one time. I think Sushmita Sen was asked this question, and she said that she doesn't believe that there is only one person in the world, and you can fall in love multiple times. And that sort of stuck with me because I realized that I resonate with that. I resonate with the fact that every time I have fallen in love in my life, it has taught me how much more love I have to give. And the fact that when I'm in love, that makes me happy. So it's very selfish for me to fall in love because I enjoy the process of being in love, which is also something that people don't usually think about it from that perspective. They feel मैं दे रही हूँ, I'm giving, या मैं दे रहा हूँ, मैं सब कर रहा हूँ. Nothing is satisfying this other person.
For you, love is giving.
Maybe. But for you, love is giving. For me, love is giving.
For me, love is pain.
For you, love is
I'd
pain.
rather not be in love.
Yeah.
I'd rather not experience that emotion, or at least romantic love.
Yeah. Or romantic love. Yeah, okay. No, I feel like for me, romantic love, experiencing romantic love and wanting to do things for someone is very fulfilling to me.
But now, do you need romantic love to be in a marriage? You can be in a sexless marriage. Can you be in a romantic-less marriage?
I cannot be in a sexless marriage. I cannot be in a non-romantic marriage. I cannot be.
But do you think people can?
I'm sure other people can. I also think that for a lot of other people, they have found systems and ways to make marriage work for them, to service themselves after initially trying to make it thrive. They would have tried really hard to make it thrive, fallen flat on their face, decided that they still wanted to be married because there was some light in that relationship or some form of transactional satisfaction that they were
that
getting.
Relationship or in the, because some people
Or in
just
the
want the
setup.
family,
Or in the setup.
setup.
Yeah. And then they've found ways to make the cards, make lemonade out of the lemons that have been served to them. Right? And I cannot say that they're not happy. I think they're happy.
You're assuming that.
I cannot say that they're not happy. Like, I cannot assume that one cannot assume that all of these people that have made lemonade out of the lemons that they were given are unhappy people. I feel.
But when they come to you and they say like, oh, I'm not happy in my marriage.
They have a lot of resentment that they want to work towards, but they don't realize they want to get rid of that resentment, because it is an emotional burden to carry with yourself. It's a huge load to carry with yourself all the time. And for some people, they have that self realization कि boss मैं इतना भरा हुआ है कि अब सांस लेने को नहीं हो रहा है, बट छोड़ना भी नहीं है, तो अब क्या करें?
Yeah, like I can't, like for example, all the clients that I have, like I try and like push them a little bit. Like I cannot stand myself with people who live in resentment. Like if you are unhappy and you're constantly coming to me and complaining about how your wife is not doing the things that you want to do, or if your husband is not having sex with you, and you just do it again and again for a number of years, then for me it's like, okay, if you don't want to do anything and you just want to come here and cry, I'm not the person for you, because I'm not gonna watch and sit, you being resentful towards yourself or towards the other person. I will push for change. And usually that push for change is like, okay, now either you give an ultimatum to yourself or you give an ultimatum to your partner.
I love that you think like that. I have a slightly different process, but I think the reason that I have that different process is because I'm still newer in the work and in life than you have been with your experiences and with the multitude of clients that you have had to deal with.
What you're talking about is almost like resilience. So how much resilience is required? Like we talk about adjusting, right? But is it like resilience, adjusting, who's doing the adjusting, then there is resentment, and your life at home becomes a nightmare. How long will you live with that nightmare?
Yeah, no, I the capacity then comes to play. It's the resilience, the capacity, whether you are at capacity.
But is it worth it just because you think that not giving up on a relationship is looked down upon?
I think now it's ulta. I think it's ulta now. People want to give up quicker than they've given it a shot. The number of people that get divorced within the first 3 years of their marriage has shot up dramatically in the last 10 years, data-wise.
So is that a bad thing though?
No, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's an interesting observation.
People are less tolerant?
Yeah.
They're chasing happiness more, you feel?
And what their idea of chasing happiness is can look very different to what the systemic concept of marriage is.
So we don't enjoy pain anymore? Like earlier somebody enjoyed a painful situation, or like they stayed in a painful situation for too long? Or they found ways. No escape.
No, they found ways. That's what I'm saying.
What are the ways?
Earlier, infidelity is one big way that people have escaped their marriages while still keeping them alive.
Okay, so it's like that little chocolate that you get outside just to feel good.
Yeah. It's like dal chawal is great at home, but once in a while I like to eat chicken. You know that entire that full dialogue that Ranbir Kapoor had in Ye Jawani Hai Diwani was कि किसी दिन Chinese, किसी दिन momo, किसी दिन chicken, whatever that dialogue was about कि dal chawal for 20 years till you die is just like not his scene. And which is also a very common thing in the younger generation now, which is that whether it's common in the younger generation or people that have been bit by it in the older generation, commitment phobia. But the system of marriage specifically is a system that is very slowly and with a lot of resistance getting almost at a glacial pace. It's getting updated. It's not getting updated to the way that the world functions today. But relationships are. So it's not like infidelity didn't exist earlier. People were escaping marriages. And people that were not escaping those marriages resent their partners for being able to escape them when they have not been able to. Not for the lack of choice. It's more for the fact that how can you do this to me?
Yeah, but how long will you stay in an uncomfortable situation? I'm not understanding.
Then get out of the marriage. Does ethics have a role to play in this entire conversation? Values have such a huge role to play in choosing a partner, but staying in the relationship में ethics वाला conversation भी तो होना चाहिए ना फिर.
But what is ethics?
मतलब you can't wake up one morning.
What is ethics to
There
you?
is, I think the ethic of commitment is an extremely important ethic to hold true to yourself if you've chosen to get married in a world where marriage is not the be all and
But
end.
what if I can't? Because my wife nags me all the time. Like, she's constantly nagging, asking things from me.
Leave.
Like,
Leave. If you cannot stay committed to a human being, leave.
but
Don't
what will
dupe
I tell
them.
society?
That's a you problem. Don't dupe the person who you are committed to into believing that you are bringing to the table the same amount of commitment that they are bringing. What does that say for you as a human being, for someone that does not have the ethics to hold on to
But then what if people...
the commitment of marriage? Don't be married. Live in. The day you don't feel like living together, get out of it. Nobody told you to get the government involved.
But what if like my partner then takes away all my wealth?
Don't get the government involved to begin with. If you are
Like,
somebody
don't
that
get married.
don't get married.
Are you telling everyone not to get married?
If they feel like
I
the
thought we
system
were
of
pro
marriage,
marriage now.
I am pro marriage for the people
Was it
that
pro-marriage?
believe. No, there was never pro or con.
Okay.
So I am pro marriage for the people that understand the commitment of it and don't think of it as an end goal, but
that's why
actually think of it as a new project.
But that's why people have become so phobic of it, because the commitment is just so much.
But that's because the expectations have not been set correctly.
But the expectations have a standard, which is monogamy.
But you can have a non-monogamous marriage.
Can you?
Yes. 100%, and do it ethically too.
Nobody will agree to that.
But that's exactly where we come in as people to kind of.
me, you.
I mean, we as coaches come in there, I believe, to explain and advocate for the fact that not marriage is also like sort of a cookie cutter that you don't necessarily have to fit your cookie into. It's fine, but you and your partner have to be both on the same page about it. I think what people very often forget is that your first responsibility in any marriage is to your partner, not to your family, not to your children, not to society, not to your own servicing. It is your first most important commitment within that entire system is to the other person. It is to make sure that that other person is on the same page as you about whatever you decide to do. Boss, go ahead and open up the marriage. If you have, for whatever reason, less of a libido, allow your partner to get their needs met elsewhere. If your partner has more of a libido or you have more of a libido, check with your partner if it's okay for you to create a system where you are allowed to get your needs met. Choosing to not communicate with the one human being that you are supposed to have all that communication with, just because it's easier to do chori until you get caught, is to what end is that relationship then?
Take a deep breath. Take a deep breath.
Yeah, clearly I have very strong opinions. And I'm very happy to have those strong opinions. But I feel
But the point is that I have the same opinions. But I understand, especially when clients come, that they struggle communicating certain needs.
And
So-
that is the same with me. But I'll try and help them communicate their needs better. No, it's fine. I'll try and help them communicate their needs better. What I will not do is allow them to believe that what they're doing is okay. Because That would be a lie as to
But
my practice.
let's say that somebody needs to confess or whatever, like they've been cheating and or they've been so what I get a lot is I get a lot of clients who are contemplating or like thinking about cheating because they've reached an extreme point. Right? So they are contemplating the affair. Right? They are at a certain stage of decision making.
Correct.
Okay. Some people have been in that stage and they haven't had the access to, speak to a coach because or a therapist because they've not really thought about it. Because there is a lot of shame around thinking about, going to a mental health professional that usually deals with these issues. Like most people will go to their friends, but because it's so hush hush, they will not even share it with their friends that they're thinking of having an affair or they're attracted
Very
to someone.
rarely they'll share it with a friend.
So they are not able to communicate this to anyone.
Correct.
So when those lucky ones who have that moment of, that bulb, it's like, let me check online if there's anyone that I can speak to this about. They're at a certain stage of decision making, which is where you start thinking about. So if you catch someone while they're thinking about it, like you can have that conversation like, okay, these are the consequences of, you cheating. Will you be able to live with the guilt? And sometimes when they go through the process of thinking about it, they might go and cheat. Like a lot of men will go to sex workers. That's also cheating, right? If it's a sexual need, then they will go to sex workers. And then after some time, when they've experienced that, they find out something about themselves. They realize that they need even emotional connection or they need like an actual affair. And then they start really thinking about their needs. So they go through a phase where they might cheat, there is infidelity, and then they realize that actually it's not for me. It feels exciting, but there are other things that I could do instead. So they try it and then they come back. So like, it's not about, okay, now leave and go. It's
but
about also
it's okay
like
for them to try whatever they want to try at the risk of being dishonest to their partner.
But you know how many people know that this is going to happen. Many people in relationships, they know that their partner is going outside and they're okay, but that conversation is not happening.
Okay, but there is some understanding where this person knows and I know, and there's a don't ask, don't tell policy.
No, that's not being communicated. When you go into a don't ask, don't tell policy, you're still communicating at least a few times that, listen, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to do certain things. And then the partner says, okay, you do whatever you want, but don't tell me. And that happens at least 3 to 4 times. It's not that, okay, you do whatever you want. Okay?
Sure.
But there are also those people who don't want that confrontation. They don't want that confrontation at all.
Yeah.
And they don't say that. They know that a person is having an affair.
It's half the aunties in Calcutta while I was growing up, I want to tell you.
Right.
Obviously not very close family friends for sure that I know of. But there was always that conversation around it. The boys are going to Thailand. And the boys have planned a boys' trip to Thailand. And for a very long time, obviously when I was younger, I had no idea what that meant. But the women were very much aware of what they were planning to do and what the boys were in the mood to do and what they were going to go and do in Thailand. Okay? So, even then, when a woman is like, okay, go with your boys. I know obviously is aware of what they're going to be doing. They are completely comfortable with what they're doing. You come back, don't ask, don't tell policy. Fine. I feel like that kind of messaging is also, because there is no vocabulary around it, because there is no conversation, because somebody might feel it's not really that important to actually discuss because there is no emotional thing that is being fulfilled here. A lot of people in the previous generation have this thought process, case in point too much that show, have that thought process ke emotional infidelity is a higher level of infidelity than physical infidelity, whatever that thought process is. But that kind of
So is it but it's a generational thing then?
No, I feel like that kind of sort of conversation also, where it is accepted and
But then imagine
overlooked,
now
is different from keeping somebody in the dark completely.
But some people want to be in the dark and they don't say it, and their partners assume that they want to be in the dark because they know their partners and they think that they won't be able to deal with it.
But can you then
So
be
you're
sure that
protecting.
they would be okay with it if they came to know about it?
But what if they have a nervous breakdown and they go on like antidepressant medication, but they're not gonna leave because
And what does that say? What does that say for the health of, or what does that say for the status of that relationship? Can we completely deny the fact that at that point there is a larger issue at play than just stepping out of the marriage to go and have a little bit of sex? Like, there's a much bigger issue at play there. And if we're not going to allow them to at least see that and understand why there is this lack of honesty, why there is this lack
But do you realize how many people love living in denial?
And
do you realize how many people...
I'm sure I also do. I'm sure I also do.
Yeah.
I think all of us love living in denial.
No, I don't. But
I think at some stage in our lives, we've all loved living in denial until we have probably realized that it didn't serve us well. And then we learn otherwise. Being that ostrich that digs your head in the sand and pretends like nobody can see you is a great way to live life, only until you realize that it was only just your head and your eyes that were closed. But there needs to be somebody who can at some point call people out for choosing the wrong things for themselves, then choosing to live with the things that are not serving them.
Whose responsibility is that? Your friends?
Yes, sometimes it's your friends, sometimes it's your family, sometimes it's your siblings.
But what if you've not told anyone because you are too ashamed of it yourself?
Then it's your therapist if you've had a chance to tell your therapist.
But what if I don't know?
If it's not your coach, otherwise listen to this conversation. We just had such a long conversation.
Well done.
What for is media if not this? I truly do believe that if there is absolutely no way to get some form of messaging across to somebody, they must watch something that will change their mind or make them think about something that they've been living in denial about.
I feel like Doordarshan now.
Messages
for public health.
I'm happy to be anything between Doordarshan and the most woke podcast on the planet, as long as in some way you're able to put out the fact that in a world where ethical non-monogamy is a reality, in a world where open marriage is a reality, in a world where we have now admitted, much like Esther Perel says, that infidelity was born the day that the concept of marriage was born. It is the state of affairs. You can then stop falling into that same pit again. Evolve as a society. Evolve that system.
Sure. But I mean, just because I have too many clients who are going through this and they're not able to communicate, their wives would leave, families will get destroyed. The point is that it's like you cannot apply that rule to everyone.
But if their wife is leaving and their family is getting
everybody is at a different stage in that journey. You cannot treat like, it's not like this is ethical and this is non-ethical. I understand the principle. The principle is there, but human existence is a bit more like colorful, a bit more like textured and stuff.
So, very good point. Tell me, where is infidelity ethical? Give me an example.
But it's not, sometimes it's not just about ethics.
No, I'm asking about ethics.
It's about kindness also, or understanding.
So I completely, I have a very strong view on the fact that if you have already cheated on your partner and it is not something that you are going to repeatedly do, There is no need to come clean in the conversation of trying to be, oh, radical honesty, and I must tell you everything, and whether it hurts you or it doesn't hurt you, it doesn't bother me. That's not where I'm coming from. What I'm saying is, if there is an urge, is there a way for us to preempt the dumpster fire that could be this relationship if things didn't go according to our amazing plans, which we're always very delusional about, and decide to have that difficult conversation, whatever that conversation might look like, before. If you've already done the deed and you're not planning to repeat it.
All right. So what are the conversations that one needs to have before getting married?
Aili, okay, fine. I agree with you on everything. But now you have to tell me, what are the 3 things at the top of your list for what you would tell a couple to talk about before they get married?
Okay, I'm going to give 6 instead.
Okay, but difficult conversations.
Difficult? They're not difficult. Come on. One is if your values align, not just like family values, but like your personal values, right? So we have family and you. Then what is it that you're going to do in life? Like your goals in life, are they aligned in some form or the other? Then we spoke about sexual compatibility, but you don't need to be compatible. You can be incompatible, but at least have that conversation so you know how you're going to fulfill that need of each other. Maybe someone doesn't want any, someone wants too much. Find a way in between. So that conversation needs to happen before. And then we spoke about money, like how much you want to save, invest, and spend both ways. And how much do you expect the other person to do at the same time? And we spoke about family. So family, how important is family to you? What kind of engagement do you expect with your family or the other person's family and vice versa? I think the other thing, the last thing that needs to be really discussed is how you are going to repair when you fight, because you're going to fight at some point or the other. In fact, you're going to fight a lot. So how are you going to repair that relationship and make sure that it lasts for a long time?
Okay, so Aili, what is then an open marriage?
So an open marriage is not cheating. It's not that one partner is open and has multiple relationships. An open marriage is when both parties are engaging separately, either parallelly, or they could be engaging together as well. Like maybe you could go and meet other partners and have things, sexual things happening between the 4 of you, the 6 of you, however many of you. Or you can individually go and have separate relationships. These could be romantic relationships or it could be sexual relationships, but both of you are going in today's world. Back in the day, it used to be not just men, but mostly men. Now, open marriages is more about equality. So we both have the same sort of rights.
Yeah. I think also that open marriages are for people that might choose to not step out of their marriage, but they're okay with their partner stepping into the open space of the marriage. It just is the equality of, if that door is open for you, it's open for me too. Not necessary that everyone must have to be stepping out.
I would say from client experiences that if one person goes and the other one is not doing anything, that person will start resenting the second person. So that's a consequence of opening just one way.
Yeah. Aili, when a person socialized as a man comes to you for a heterosexual marriage, what are the 3 most important or like the most heard of questions you hear from men about what they are expecting out of their marriages or what they're scared of?
Mostly they're scared. Men are scared of getting married. They're much more scared than women are, to be honest. They're scared of losing their freedom. Like, will I be able to meet my friends? Will I be able to go for your cricket matches, etc.? Then the other thing that they're worried is whether their partner will be fitting into the family, whether they get along with the family, whether they're willing to move into the house or whether they're willing to cook or help the mother through like household stuff. And of course, like whether they'll be having sex or will they get bored of having sex with them because they feel that they'll want something new all the time. So if they haven't had sex with them, they're worried about that. If they've already had sex and they've figured out that they're compatible, then they usually don't worry about that. But that's something I tell them to worry about because that will eventually decrease. What about you?
Interesting. I've got questions like, will I be able to satisfy them? And will I be able to provide for them in ways that they want? I've also got the same one, a different version of the same one, which is that will my freedoms be curbed if I get into this marriage? Will I be able to hang out with the boys? I definitely need my boy time. I definitely need my own games time. I need my own sports time. I need all of those things. Holiday time, so on and so forth. And also I've heard of one which I got very recently, was I don't know if I will be able to handle if they do better than me.
Oh wow, that I've never heard that.
Yeah.
before.
Like which I found very interesting because I've heard this quite a few times in some form or another, which is that how is a man supposed to handle a situation where their partner is doing better than them? Yeah. They're super scared of that. Like, will the family be okay with it? Will I be the loser?
But will the family be okay? I still understand.
Will our relationship look different if they are the provider in that relationship? Yeah.
The question is, how do you make sure that your clients feel comfortable in their bodies?
I think exploring bodies, there are 2-3 ways that you can sort of start, like a exploration of body 101. One is actually feeling the sensation of your own hands and your own warmth in the different parts of your body and sort of exploring what they feel like. So like a sensorial experience almost. Another one is sometimes to also smell what different parts of your body smell like. One is sit in front of the mirror to sort of get used to visually seeing your own self naked and finding parts of your body that you find sexy, or like parts of your body that you think are hot, things that you want to, the features that you want to accentuate in the kind of clothes that you want to wear in the bedroom, or like lingerie and stuff like that, is also another, definitely another way to explore. And I think one, of course, slightly more evolved way to explore would be to start using toys, and see what different kinds of toys with different kinds of pressures and intensities and different methods, what impact they have on the kind of pleasure that you want to receive.
Yeah. No, I usually like with the sensations, I make them start, for example, with things that they're already doing. Like, for example, applying lotion, or in the shower, taking that extra effort to go through each body part and just feel the sensations. And with toys, not just like toys that we know of, but even different sensations with different textures, different temperatures, like ice, water, lube. Sometimes feeling lube on your skin,
warm oil.
Yeah, so hot, cold, different sensations.
Yeah.
And I found that something that really helps is clicking photos of yourself, like self-boudoir. We've had a couple of workshops on that. Basically learning ways on how to click your body and look at your body in a slightly more erotic way. So wearing different types of maybe lingerie, or maybe just some sheets all over, and see how your body looks from different angles, maybe close-ups on certain body parts, and start admiring your body for what it can look like when you actually pay attention and bring your awareness to those movements.